If I had to pick my favorite design house of all time, it's going to have to be Pininfarina, because they designed the Ferrari 458, which in my opinion is one of the most beautiful Ferraris of all time, and I do think the most beautiful since probably the Ferrari 250. So now, since they've parted ways with Ferraris, they're doing projects sort of independently with different types of brands, and I think that's a good idea for them to explore their creativity and applying that onto different brand identities. So today, we're gonna have a look at a car that I think is a great idea, but it's also a great design. There are a couple of two specifically worries I have with this car if it goes into production. We're going to talk about those. But the car I'm talking about is this one right here. It's called the NAM X HUV, and it's a hydrogen-powered SUV partially fueled by removable capsules, paving the way for a seamless and carbon-free experience in mobility. And looking at this design, you can tell that this is, it's a good design. I'm going to let you know why, because we're going to have a look at the front, side, rear, and also the very crazy looking interior. It's probably the most crazy interior I've seen, and I'm not sure if they're going to put that interior into production, but it feels like they're going to do that. So more on the design later. I want to talk about this technology that we have here. I haven't personally really looked into too much of hydrogen and what it means for automotive, the entire industry moving forward. When I looked at this design, I got interested in it, and then I looked into the technology, so I want to share that with you today. We all know that we do have a lot of EV push now, but there are a lot of problems with EVs, specifically the charging time, and you also have the cost and the not so green manufacturing of the batteries. And that's why I think hydrogen is a really good idea, because you can still have the rumble of a V8, and the only thing that comes out of the exhaust is going to be hot air and water, and that's it. And the reason I think this is a good idea, because I love internal combustion engines. And why do I love internal combustion engines so much? Well, it is of course the obvious. You have the noise, the engagement of the driving experience, the vibrations. And the reason I love those things is because it feels with an internal combustion engine, it feels like it's putting in an effort. An internal combustion vehicle is like a living and breathing being that you feel is working hard to move you forward the more you push it. The revs build up until it's out of breath, and you throw in another gear, giving it more air to keep pushing forward. However, if you've driven an EV, they're very, very quick. You can't really argue with that, but it feels effortless. It feels like the car really doesn't care. It can do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds in its sleep, and yet it somehow feels like you're still stationary. It doesn't breathe. It's just a piece of technology. That is the reason why I think hydrogen is the way, is definitely an option moving forward. So let's talk about this and what it actually is from this Muscle Car and Trucks article. I'm going to link it down in the description. So Pininfarina's hydrogen V8 SUV offers a glimpse at a better sounding future because it still has a V8 in it. And by the way, hydrogen technology is not something that just small companies are working on. This is something that BMW, we're going to look at that. I'm going to show you an article about this in a minute. Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, they're all putting in massive amounts of efforts and resources into hydrogen car technology. They're doing it kind of in the background. It feels like they have that as a backup plan if this EV project is not working out as they expected it to. We'll all have to try and come to terms with the fact that the only acceleration sound we will hear on the roads will be subtle whistle of an EV motor. Future generations may never have the chance to truly enjoy the familiar sound of the V8 engine car taking off at a light or accelerating just for fun. Manufacturing hydrogen engine is significantly cheaper than the disaster that is the massive batteries required to make EVs work. The luxury crossover that we talk about here, this HUV from Pininfarina, uses an aluminum 6.2 liter V8 running on hydrogen. The automaker has stated that there will be two different models, one with 300 horsepower, top speed of 124 miles per hour. 0 to 60 for this base model is 6.5 seconds. And then the other option will be the powerful GTH with 550 horsepower and top speed of 155 miles per hour. And 0 to 60 for this one is 4.5 seconds. Normally, I'm not really a fan of a coupe SUV style, but this looks pretty good for this type of package. It actually reminds me a lot of the Genesis GV80 coupe SUV, I do believe that was. It reduces the overall weight of the vehicle, and instead they talk about this as an evolution of the internal combustion engine powertrain. It features a removable tank system that enables refueling in an entirely different way. The motorized Cap X charging system comprises 6 capsules that can be refueled at a hydrogen station or delivered to the driver. You have an estimated range of this car of 497 miles, and luckily the NAM X won't be the only hydrogen power vehicle in the future. Cummins has been diligently working on making their hydrogen engines as well, and I want to show you this article from just a couple of months ago, September 13th of last year. Hydrogen fuel cell is revving up. BMW and Toyota lead the way to zero-emission vehicles. Here you can see a BMW X5 completely powered by hydrogen and of course the normal engine, but it doesn't have any emissions whatsoever. Leading automakers are investing heavily in the development of this game-changing vehicle fuel cell technology, and hydrogen combustion produces only water and warm air as a byproduct. And an industry report projects that FCEVs could reach 13 million by 2030 with over 10,000 refueling stations globally. Now I looked this up, and this is one of the problems. It's definitely the infrastructure for this type of vehicles, because if we look at hydrogen charging stations in the US, we only have, as of 2023, there are only 59 open retail hydrogen stations in the US, which is it's definitely not enough to compete with EVs. Because if you look at EVs and how many electric charging stations we have in the US, we have over 138,000 charging stations. So if we're gonna make this work, we definitely need to work on the infrastructure here. Now going back to this BMW project, BMW hydrogen car drives around the world. The car maker has been studying and working on the zero-emission vehicle tech since 2000, way back in the day. And I do believe I remember seeing a BMW 7 Series hydrogen concept in a car show in Sweden, and that was way back. I can't remember the exact year. And in their pledge to reach net zero emissions by 2050, the German brand is ramping up its hydrogen development game. It has started developing its own hydrogen fuel cells. And these hydrogen X5s, they boast a drive system with a total of 401 horsepower. It drives at a top speed of 112 miles per hour and has a range of about 313 miles or 504 kilometers. And another benefit with hydrogen is it won't flinch at freezing temperatures at -20 Celsius. And it also performed impressively at 45 degrees Celsius as well. The X5 hydrogen offers long distance capability with short refueling stops for zero emission driving. The German car maker's long-term goal is to bring these pilot hydrogen vehicles into production by 2030. And Toyota has also set an ambitious goal of getting its recently revealed hydrogen-powered truck Hilux on the market by the same year. And they want to sell 200,000 hydrogen power vehicles. In terms of range, this BMW X5 gets about 365 miles of range. And you also have other big brands considering hydrogen fuel cells, such as Honda and Hyundai, and Land Rover is also developing its own FCEV as a strategy to meet net zero emissions by 2036. So this is a big project that big companies are working on, but you don't really hear about it that much. Now jumping into Photoshop here, and let's have a look at this NAM X or NAM X HUV designed by Pininfarina. The reason why I think this is such a good design is because we do have a continuity from the front to the side, the rear, and then it also comes back in this crazy interior. Looking at the front then, the reason why I think this reminds me of a Genesis is pretty obvious, because we do have a triangular grille in the front, very reminiscent to the grille that we have in Genesis models, and we also have the same sort of pattern inside of the grille here, further having a stronger connection to Genesis, in addition to these vents down here, which also look very Genesis, but this feels a lot more chiseled and not so fluid like the Genesis. We do have a big LED that goes all the way down to these points down here, so they kind of cross in this area and creates a strong brand identity by having this big X in the front end. And I do think it's a beautiful design. You do have the headlights right here, not really bumper headlights, but they do sit underneath this big daytime run light up top. And looking at the side, we have this X in the front end. We also have the X coming back in the side view. This is a very interesting shoulder line, because look at where the lines go down and meet in the front and in the back. We have this line cutting down right here, cutting into the front end through the front axle, and then comes back in this area. So if we draw a line from this area through the front axle, it then comes back right here. It has a clear connection to it. And this is what good car design is supposed to be, in my opinion. It's supposed to have a line flow that wraps all around the car. You have the same feeling with this line. Intersects right in the middle and then sort of has a connection to where the bumper starts in this area. Not as clear as a connection that we have in the front end, but still, nevertheless, it is a connection in the front to the shoulder line. We have of course, a SUV coupe roof line, which in this case I feel looks very good. It doesn't look like it's too front heavy, which is normally the case. And I do think that has to do with this being designed from scratch to have these type of proportions and not just take a full-size SUV and remove a lot of mass in the rear. That is usually my problem with the coupe SUVs, and that then leads to it being front heavy. Looking at the rear end, we have again a connection to the graphics, because we do have this X of the LEDs in the bottom. We have almost a Porsche-like rear end with the graphics here, very chiseled again. And this is where the cool stuff happened, because in here you have 6 different capsules that you can pull out and remove and recharge or replace by just taking out a loaded capsule and plug it back in. Now, one worry I have here, now hydrogen by itself is not flammable or explosive, but if you have some sort of ignition close to the gas, it will explode. For example, if you have a flame or an electric spark, it might explode. And I'm thinking, if you have this car in production, if you're accidentally rear-ended here, and it obviously creates a lot of heat and a lot of sparks, will the entire car then blow up, since we have these tanks sitting so close to basically being part of the bumper itself? Now, looking at the interior, as I talked about, this X shape then comes back here in this interior as well, and this is where I get a little confused if this is actually what it's going to look like when it goes into production, because this steering wheel, for example, looks very conceptual and not at all as anywhere close to any production car I've seen. And this is supposed to go into production, I believe it was in 2026. So they do have about 2 or 3 years to figure out how to make this interior follow all the regulations and the cost goals to bring this into production. And the pricing for this is supposed to be around, I think, $65,000 for the base, up to about $90,000 for the top level trim. Overall, I do think this is a pretty gorgeous coupe SUV, and I don't normally say that, but this is a Pininfarina design, and as I said, I'm glad that they're taking on projects like this so they can express their creativity by applying this and creating completely new brand identities for cars like this. And I also hope that we get a stronger push for hydrogen fuel cells and drivetrains, specifically for car enthusiasts who still want to have that internal combustion engine. Imagine having a big V8. There was a video with a former engineer for, I think, GM. He created an old Chevy truck. He transformed it into a hydrogen truck.
Nobody ever thought that a hot rodder would want hydrogen. We have no carbon at all.
And it still had the big V8, but with 0 emissions. It's just a fantastic piece of technology that I think needs a stronger push. Overall, I'm excited for where this is heading, because as I showed you, there are a lot of big brands working on this heavily in the background, and I do think this is going to be the next wave, try and reach this goal of 0 emission by 2035.